Okay, so this is just a quick little rebuttal to all of the arguments I have made thus far. I'm going to be talking about ramp at the end. I do have some compromises. I've definitely taken into consideration everybody's thoughts on the comments and on Twitter, and I hope that you guys all value that opinion a little bit more, because this is probably my refined argument taking into account everybody's thoughts. However, I do think that in the short run, this is a bad nerf as well, and I'm going to get into that just real quick. I promise it'll be real quick. And that's because Hunter is at around a quarter of the player base. And yet, all of the decks that were nerfed were its bad matchups. Taunt Druid, bad matchup for Secret Hunter and Spell Hunter. Odd Paladin, bad matchup for Secret Hunter and Spell Hunter. And then it was Kingsbane Rogue and Shudderwalk. Each class's only moderate matchup, like Rogue's best matchup into Secret and Spell Hunter, and Warlock's best matchup into Secret and Spell Hunter. Which means that, if you look here, Spell Hunter and Secret Hunter make up 15% of the stuff. That just buffed 15% of the community easily. And then Death Rattle or Cube Hunter will only had a couple of the decks it was bad against nerfed, like Odd Paladin and Kingsbane Rogue. So I think that the fact that this is being changed means that Hunter as a class is just going to become more dominant, which I think will limit diversity as a whole, because it's nerfing the most popular deck in pretty much every single class. With the only one I think needing the nerf is Odd Paladin. Hopefully we can all at least agree on that. If we do agree on that, I'm going to put a comment saying Odd Paladin deserved to get nerfed, and just try to get likes on that, because I just want something positive to come out of these videos. I've been getting kind of blasted recently. But yeah, I think that with all these nerfs, I think that Hunter's going to just become dominant, and Odd Mage is going to grow in popularity a little bit, and everything else is going to fall. It's going to be Hunter here, Mage at here around 15%, and then everything else at 10 or less. So those are just my general thoughts. Obviously, that might be a bit extreme, but I do think that Mage is going to get a little bit more, Hunter's going to get a little bit more, and everything else is going to get a little bit less. So that's the short term of this, I think. And if you want to jump on a hype train, jump on Odd Mage, because if Hunter does get more popular, Odd Mage does do well into both Secret and Spell Hunter. And Death Rattle Hunter, not as much, but meh, that's fine. It's only one of the decks that, and it's the one that's getting the least buffed, so it's actually going to probably get played less than these two in general after this. So for long term, there are a couple of issues that I see, and I hope that you all agree with me on at least this one thing. The fact that Blizzard needs to tell us these nerfs are coming sooner. They can't tell us the day of, because a lot of people who just made the Kingsbane Rogue deck now have to disenchant it and dust it, and, they lose a ton of dust. So I have a couple of people in the comments and on Twitter saying that they hated this patch because they just made Kingsbane Rogue 2 days ago. None of this was communicated, and now they just lost 4,000 dust after making this deck. And if Blizzard, had talked about this a couple of days in advance, these people would not have lost this much dust. Or if they had made the deck and were given a notice, they might have grinded out some extra games so they could have gotten more value out of the deck, rather than just all of a sudden being told that their deck is no longer going to be as good. Even if Kingsbane Rogue remains an okay deck and it changes, the fact that it happened so soon and has demoralized so many people, 5.7% of the community, that's just not healthy. And it could potentially cause people to not trust Hearthstone as much or Blizzard as much, because they're oh, I'm making this OP deck, but at any point it could just get nerfed. And that's just not something that people should have to worry about. The next thing is Shudderwalk Shaman. Shudderwalk Shaman, from a purely annoying standpoint, I can see why people want it to be nerfed, but you can make an argument for any deck being annoying. The biggest example being Hunter. You can have a Spellstone for 4 3/3 Wolves on turn 4 or 5, depending on the coin, or get 2 5/5s out and a 3/3 and an egg on turn 4 by playing the egg into the Terror Skinnstalker and play dead. Both of those combinations, I think, are more annoying and busted than Shudderwalk. Odd Warrior, tons of armor isn't very interactive to play against because it never really feels like you're making progress. And if you do end up winning the game, it usually drags in a long time and goes to fatigue because you're not going to win the game through aggro. It's just a very oppressive deck to play against for both control because you're stuck in the game for a long time, and aggro because you just get blown out of the water. Let's see here. Even Shaman, potentially the next odd paladin because you just fill the board with a ton of wide things and then buff them up with like Direwolf or Flametongue Totem and get value off of your wide boards with things like Sea Giant. Point is, there are a lot of things that can make a lot of decks annoying, and I think that the ones that needed to be focused on were the ones that were up here. Obviously, I understand that Shudderwock has been an annoying deck for a really long time, whereas Hunter is a more recent-ish development. But I still think that the decks that were focused on were not correct. Because like Kingsbane Rogue had the potential to be oppressive and annoying, but they nerfed it before it actually proved itself as that, rather than like, well, they kept a class with 4 top 8 decks with 55% win rates plus untouched. And I think that is what upset me the most because of the fact that Hunter was not touched at all. I think that if this patch also had like a Hunter nerf thrown in there as well, like a Spellstone nerf, I wouldn't have been as upset. But the reason why I was as upset is because all of their bad matchups got nerfed, so Hunter's just going to become better. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I think that the Shudderwock nerf is oppressive to Shudderwock, and obviously people are going to try to make Shudderwock work. I just don't think it's going to be nearly as popular. But without further ado, let's just jump into the last topic, being ramp. Now, I'm going to talk about why I think ramp is not as good as people think it is, but I'm also going to talk about the things that people told me that actually spoke to me. And the first one is the fact that with ramp being nerfed, it can lead to more potential creativity with the Druid class as a whole in the future. I think that could be healthy, but I think that could be healthy, but I also don't think that is necessarily what was needed to be done. Rather than nerfing something to make room for something else, why not push for it by actually releasing cards that push another archetype rather than more armor, more big creatures, more giant taunts that just make the deck better? Like, I don't know how else to explain this other than the fact that I think that in order to push this, like when they made Heal Paladin a thing, they didn't nerf Odd, and they didn't like just gut Odd Paladin. Although they should have. Let's just assume Odd Paladin wasn't as strong. They didn't nerf like Odd Paladin and everything else, and then release some okay heal cards to try to push Heal Paladin. They came out with some really good heal synergy that really pushed Heal Paladin. That's what they should have done with Druid. Not necessarily nerf the things that make Druid what it is right now, but push something to change it. I don't know. I say I don't know a lot. I'm sorry. I'm a little flustered about this, but continuing. I think what should have happened, as I've already said, is the nerf should have been on Branching Paths and make it a 5-mana card. Actually, there are few potential nerfs, so stick with me here. To do that, because if you don't do it on turn 4, you're put in a very bad situation on turn 5. And then you're going to have to make the choice between Nourishing or Branching Paths. A lot of the time, you're probably going to Branching Paths because you need the extra health and armor, which inherently pushes Nourish out a turn anyway. Or nerf Ultimate Infestation, because a lot of people on at least like Twitter, like let's see here, there's a Twitter comment. I can't believe I lost it. Oh my goodness. So like here, it's always Growth, Coin, Nourish. First of all, no. Growth gets you 3. And then Coin Nourish, I guess. But a lot of the time, people like Branching Paths or play the Oaken Summons, which he did talk about, I guess. But then Mana Cheating, and then UI, and then pick your win condition. The only way that this became a busted class and a busted like thing is because of the fact that you could play UI and then just eventually pick your win condition. If you didn't have this, ramp wouldn't be as good. And now let me explain to you why it wouldn't be as good. Because you need to use the cards to actually ramp up. Having the mana means nothing if you only have like 2 or 3 cards in hand that are like mediocre. It's the same reason why Astral Communion was never good. Like, I almost never saw it played. And whenever I played with my friends, it was always like as a meme, and I beat them pretty handily every single time. Them getting 10 mana crystals on turn 4, you could say, well, that's busted. That's even faster than a wild growth into Nourish. But you don't have any cards in your hand. The only reason why the ramp right now is good is because the Ultimate Infestation draws you the cards. Obviously, Astral Communion was a poorly designed card, in my opinion. And it's a bad example, but it's a kind of extreme example of what I'm trying to show. I'm trying to show that just the pure ramp, like this is unprecedented. I don't think there's anything else that could get you 10 mana on turn 4. I don't think that the ramp itself is the thing that's busted. I think the fact that they made ramp so safe with defensive options, so you get there guaranteed, as well as holding on to some cards, like Branching Paths, you could also draw cards with it too, as well as Ultimate Infestation. The biggest issue is the fact that stuff was built around the ramp so ridiculously much, to say the least. Like, I think that if they didn't have those same options, if they didn't have Ferocious Howl, if they didn't have Oaken Summons, if they didn't have Ultimate Infestation or Branching Paths or Spreading Plague or Malfurion or any of these ridiculous defensive options that made ramp safe, ramp would not have been nearly as good. That being said, I do think that nerfing ramp leads to more creativity in the future, and I do think that if you were to nerf ramp, because ramp still is an issue, like no other class has ramp, and it's a little bit annoying to deal with. If you were to nerf ramp, nerf one of the two. Don't kill the ramp archetype. Just nerf Nourish, because that pushes off the turn 10 by 1 turn still. And it's fine. Like, it still pushes out the late game a little bit. It makes you have to wait longer to actually Nourish. It being 6 mana means you have to choose between it and Spreading Plague, so it's another thing where you have to choose between actually Nourishing and a defensive option, because on turn 5, the reason why I was so busted on turn 5 was because there was nothing else a Druid would want to do on turn 5 than that. It would just always be Nourish, because what else are they going to play? Branching Paths is 4, gives you defense, into Nourish, into Spreading Plague, or Malfurion or something. Point is, I think that by nerfing one, that would have been more of a balanced nerf. By nerfing the cards around it, that would have been a more balanced nerf. And if they wanted to change the identity of Druid, they should have released better cards around that, like more Treant-based cards, which they did, and it might actually push the Treant meta. But I don't think ramp on its own is the problem, because of cards like Astral Communion being the most efficient ramp ever, being able to gain you so much mana. I think that proves that just the pure ramp itself is not as good. That being said, I will admit that ramp is oftentimes in a lot of the Druid decks, so nerfing it a little bit, like nerfing one of the two, could actually be beneficial, but nerfing both of them seems a little bit silly to me. But those are just my overall thoughts. I tried to compromise a little bit on the ramp thing, because I do understand I was being extreme, saying it was the worst patch in history. But I also think that it wasn't necessarily the thing that needed to be focused on, but I do think that it was still an issue, I guess. I do agree with that, and the fact that it's being used in all of the decks so far. I had an example using Secrets and Hunter and Spell Hunter, and I don't think it necessarily lines up, but I'm just going to leave you with this. The nerf on the ramp is similar to saying, okay, Spell Hunter's busted. Instead of nerfing the Spellstone, which is the actual problem, we're going to nerf the core of the problem, being Secrets. That way we never have anything like this happen again. Instead of nerfing the Secrets or nerfing the ramp, how about you just keep the class having its identity and learning from your mistakes, and not releasing anything that can abuse these mechanics as hard as possible? Like, not releasing something that can be as powerful as the Spellstone, or not releasing something that can be as valuable as the Ultimate Infestation. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. If you guys disagree with this comparison, feel free to tell me about it. If you guys do agree with it and say that this nerf or that potential change to Hunter being compared to Druid is an okay comparison, because I think that if you nerfed Hunter, or if you nerfed the Secrets, people would be a lot more upset, because Secrets have never really been the issue, and Hunter has only been like overpowered for a little bit of time. So I hope you all enjoyed. I enjoyed this entire conversation. Although I got blasted a little bit, I did enjoy all of the conversation. And I hope all of you have a fantastic day. And if you want to continue this conversation in the comments, I'm more than happy to. But until then, see ya.